This video is part 2, my dear friends. So now consider the parable of the 10 virgins. 5 were ready and 5 were not. My dear friends, again, why did Jesus mention to his disciples that no one will know the day or the hour? That's because while we are here on earth, my dear friends, we are being tested in every way. We are tested how we make choices, decisions, love and serve, hate or be more selfish, forgive or resent, give or hoard, show mercy or be cruel, advance the kingdom of heaven or squander the Lord's given gifts and talents. And this is why no one knows the day or the hour, not even Jesus himself. So, my dear friends, if anyone comes and states that they received a particular date from Jesus regarding his return, they would make Jesus a liar. Because he himself mentioned in verse 36 that he even does not know, considering the fact that the angels don't know too. So he does not know the day of his return. That's why, my dear friends, 3 times pre his crucifixion, he mentions this. And as I mentioned in my first video, the 4th time, right after his crucifixion and resurrection, right before he ascends to heaven, he says the same thing to them again in Acts chapter 1, verse 7. And then after he ascends to heaven, sits at the right hand of the Father, he appears in the Spirit to John on the Patmos island, and he says the same thing again and again. In Revelation chapter 16, verse 15, "Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake, keeping his garments on, that he may not go about naked and be seen exposed." So according to his teachings, my dear friends, his disciples preached exactly what they received from Jesus. Nothing more, nothing less, not adding anything or taking away anything from it, as it states in Mathew 5:19. Now, Peter was one of the original 12 disciples. So he goes on writing a letter. In his 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10, we see when he wrote a letter, he said, "But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar, the elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything done in it will be laid bare." So he mentions that the day of the Lord, his return, will be like a thief in the night. Paul, my dear friends, was one of the disciples that was called by Jesus himself while he was on his way to Damascus to persecute the Christians. Acts chapter 9. Jesus Christ called Paul to send them to preach to the Gentiles. So now Paul was Saul. Before he went on preaching, he went to the desert of Arabia for 3 years, and he learned everything about the gospel and the revelations from Jesus Christ himself. That's why Paul writes his letter to the Galatians in chapter 1, verse 12, says that everything I learned, the gospel that I received, I did not receive it by a human teaching, but I received it from Jesus Christ himself. So when Paul goes on writing his letters, he mentions that he wrote 14 epistles, we know that. And in his letter to the Thessalonians, in the first letter to the Thessalonians, chapter 1, the first letter of Thessalonians, chapter 5, verses 2 and 4, he mentions it, the same thing as Jesus taught, as Peter wrote. And he says, "For you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night." This is Paul writing. "While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. But you, brothers and sisters, are not in darkness, so that this day should surprise you like a thief." So why does he say this in verse 4? That's because Jesus mentions that we should be awake, alert, vigilant, always praying and always ready, because we do not know the day or the hour. Like I mentioned, the parable of the 10 virgins. 5 were ready and 5 were not. Now, my dear friends, I would like to conclude my video by saying this is an example of how we can discern to extinguish every fiery dart of the enemy that comes to us, whether we are reading a word, somebody is teaching, we are receiving a prophetic message. We always have to cross-reference that from the word of the Lord. And in order for us to do that, we have to be acquainted by the word of the Lord and have the full armor of God on us. And that is to fight by the sword of the Spirit. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 17. I love you all with the love of Christ. Stay blessed.